All right, what's up, sluts? So it's been officially announced that in UFC 311, Arman Sarukian will be challenging Islam Makhachev for the lightweight belt. We also have the co-main event, Marab versus Umar, but I'm not going to get into that right now. I want to talk about this matchup. I want to talk about the fact that I think Arman is live for an upset. There's a lot of factors going into this rematch. First of all, the fact that it's a rematch alone is kind of giving you an idea of what could happen in this second fight. If you watch the first fight, you would know a couple things. One, Arman is an exceptional wrestler. Two, Makhachev's defense always going to be on point in terms of the striking defense. So that's always going to be there. But there is some caveats in that first fight that they had a couple years ago that should be also taken into account when you talk about the rematch. When Islam fought Arman for the first time, Arman took that fight on short notice. When Arman took that fight on short notice, it also happened to be Arman Sarukian's UFC debut. So imagine the type of mental pressure you have literally going against you. Regardless of how mentally strong someone like Arman Sarukian is, these factors will always going to take an effect regardless of how strong mentally the athlete is. Arman had the debut pressure. He had the pressure going against someone from the Khabib Nurmagomedov camp. It was a lot. And considering the fact that he was able to go the full 15 minutes and keep it competitive in the wrestling scrambles, go back and watch that fight. Those scrambles were exceptionally fun to watch. And you don't say that a lot when it comes to wrestling, grappling, and scrambles. But that Arman Sarukian Islam Makhachev fight, first one was very entertaining. So the fact he took it he made it very competitive on a short notice, it makes you wonder what would happen if Arman had a full training camp and prepared for someone like Islam Makhachev. So that's the first few points. First one, it's a rematch. So you can look back at the first fight, that was a couple years ago, and you can see that Arman has improved in terms of a striking and all-around MMA as a whole. He's definitely improved a lot. But so has Islam Makhachev. I'm not here to discredit him, but I'm here to point out some facts that I feel like are kind of being overlooked when people talk about this fight. Seeing a lot of people online just saying, oh, it's an easy win for Islam. Islam already beat Arman, blah, 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 blah. It's not that simple. Rematches are always tricky because you're always under the assumption that, well, whoever won the first one is going to win the second one. It doesn't work always like that. It always depends on where they are in their career, how their performances were looking in the past 4 or 5 fights. There's a lot of factors going into it. So just to say that Islam beat him the first time in a very competitive decision does not mean he's going to beat Arman Sarukian in a 5-rounder. You know what I'm saying? All right. What else is about this fight? Oh, yeah. Arman is going to be Islam's youngest opponent since their first fight. So every single person Islam Makhachev has fought since that first fight with Arman Sarukian, most of these guys have been older than Islam or around the same age as Islam. So I think that's going to take a big factor. Arman's literally the youngest guy he's fought. So he's got the youth factor on his side in this fight against Islam. Another thing to take in consideration is the fact that, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, because I already know the fight went how it went, decisions went how they went, but you cannot tell me that Islam Makhachev in that first fight with Alexander Volkanovski looked like an unbeatable world beater that cannot be defeated. You know what I'm saying? Like, Volkanovski, I'm not trying to shame Volk, but he is a short dude. Arman's a little bigger, but it's still short too. But my thing is this, because I'm not trying to shame the short kings, you know what I'm saying? But my point is this, if someone from 145 division, granted, the champion of the division, one of the best, but still, a 145er should have not had that much success against a 155er, if we're being 100% honest. And Volk damn near took the 5th round from Islam Makhachev and almost finished him in the last, minute or whatever, whenever that little sequence happened at the end. Excuse me. So if Islam struggled with full camp Volkanovski, because granted he probably overlooked Volk, but the facts are the facts. Volk went out there and performed, and he was able to keep it competitive in all positions up until Islam was able to get the back and then do nothing with it and waste the whole fucking round. And then he wins that round, so whatever, dude. The way I see it, Volk won that fight. Well, he won the fight, lost the match, and Makhachev knows that he got beat that night. He knows it. He knows it. I'm not going to talk about the Volk rematch because, let's be honest, Makhachev or anyone in the Khabib camp, they're not taking a 1 week notice championship fight across the world. They're just not doing that. They're not. They not to disrespect them or shame or whatever, but the facts are the facts. They are not the type of people to take a short notice fight. They're not the type of people to do a back-to-back, come back after 3 months from their last fight. They take long breaks in between, and they don't get scrutinized for that for whatever reason. So take that into consideration. That full camp Volkanovski gave Islam Makhachev troubles. And you know who else gave Islam Makhachev some troubles? Dustin Poirier. Recently. And in UFC, what was it, 301, 302? Dustin Poirier at, 36? And with no hip movement in his body, because he has no hips. Remember, when Dustin was scheduled to fight Nate Diaz, and that fight didn't go through or fell apart, Poirier went ahead and got hip surgery, right? And if you notice in his fights after that surgery, the way he throws kicks and just certain movements he does, he's very stiff, And the fact that someone with stiff hips, essentially no hips, was able to out-grapple and get back to his feet. And there was a moment when Dustin was able to reverse Makhachev in the cage and was able to get control position. You're telling me someone like Dustin with no hips, someone like a full camp Volkanovski gave Islam Makhachev troubles, but you're telling me Arman Tsarukyan is not going to have success? Arman Tsarukyan is one of the best grapplers that Islam's fought since their first fight. And since that first fight, he's improved in the grappling. Think of it like this. The only people Arman's lost since that, Arman's only lost to 2 people, I believe. He lost to Makhachev in a decision, which granted Makhachev was able to win out the rounds, but his other loss was to Gamrot. And that was mainly because of the wrestling scrambles and control. I feel like Arman was able to piece Gamrot up on the feet if he kept it standing. But for whatever reason, they wrestled, they grappled. Gamrot was able to go into muscle memory mode and was able to get reverse positions to give him the benefit of the doubt from the judges, I guess, right? But the truth is the truth. Arman Tsarukyan, his grappling has improved. His striking has improved. I think his top control pressure when he's on top of you, if you look at the Charles Oliveira fight in the second round, those elbows he threw, he was landing on Charles. If it was a lesser opponent, if it wasn't Charles Oliveira, I think Arman gets a finish in that round. But it was Charles, and Charles has the heart of a lion. He's going to pull through. And I think Charles won that fight. But again, I'm not the judge, so I'm not going to go here and complain about it. My point is my point. That if Arman Tsarukyan has improved since their last fight, and since that last fight, the only times we've seen Islam Makhachev look human was against the 145 full camp Volkanovski and no hip 36-year-old Dustin Poirier. And Arman Tsarukyan will be age 28 when UFC 311 comes around. I got a feeling that Arman's going to give Islam Makhachev a lot more trouble than he gave him in the first fight. If you don't believe me, it is what it is. But here's some other factors I also want to take in consideration. Islam Makhachev is coming off a hand injury. I think it was a hand ligament surgery that he had. So he's coming off of an injury. So he might not feel as confident in his striking. If you ever had a hand injury, you know that like the sharpness of the pain that shoots in your hand and up in your arm when you have a broken hand or a metacarpal fracture or whatever, that shit hurts. That shit hurts like a motherfucker, and it deters you from throwing something because you don't even want to. It almost becomes the pain that you're receiving when you land a shot is not even worth it to some extent. Depends how tough you are mentally and physically if you can overcome that. But it is a factor that Islam will have to personally overcome. Another factor going into this, UFC 311 is going to be in LA. Now, if you're not from Southern California, if you're not from the Los Angeles area, that might just seem like a whatever factor, right? Arman Tsarukyan's Armenian. Again, if you've never been to LA, if you've never been to the city of Glendale, you might not understand the relevance of all this information right here I'm telling you. But let me be the one to tell you guys. UFC 311, the entire Inuit Dome, the center, I don't know if it's a dome or a center, but whatever the venue will be hosted, I guarantee I want to say at least north of 60 to 75, maybe even more than that, 75% of the crowd will be pro Arman Sarukian, will be Armenian people. The Armenian flag will be flying high in that arena. I'm telling you guys that right now. I'm telling you, if you guys don't know, you guys are going to know. Shout out to Glendale. Shout out to the 818. Shout out to the Armenians. Arman's going to have that factor of the crowd on his side. So whenever Arman does something good, the crowd's going to go crazy. Whenever Arman defends or reverses a position, the crowd's going to go crazy. Whenever Islam does something, more than likely, the crowd's going to boo. And the reason why I'm bringing this factor in is because I don't know if people remember or even picked up on this, but in the rematch with Volkanovski, leading into that rematch at the press conference, Islam Makhachev said something that was very interesting to me. And again, most people will overlook it and think it doesn't mean anything. But to me, I kind of picked it up and I read between the lines, I guess. And I'm paraphrasing here. Well, Makhachev says something along the lines of, to Volk, he says something along the lines of, the crowd will be on my side. Now you're going to know what it's like to have the crowd against you. He says something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing again. But go back and watch that press conference to see. I'm not bullshitting you guys. I'm being 100% right here, right now. And Volk was cold, bro. He responded back saying, "Hey, I don't need the crowd on my side. I'm a champion. You can all boo me. I don't give a fuck." So credit to Volk. Volkanovski had the balls to take a fight on a 1 week notice and fly across the world. Again, not to shame Khabib or his team, but for a fact these Dagestanis are not going to take a fight on a week notice and fly across the fucking world. Volkanovski, he did that shit. So did Kamaru Usman. So shout out to him too. But yeah, so if you put in all of these little factors going into it, does Islam Makhachev going to be the favorite? I would assume so, and I would pick him to be the favorite. But I still feel like Arman can pull this off with all the factors I've listed. The fact that the venue will be a heavily pro-Armenian, pro-Arman Sarukian crowd. The fact that Arman is going to be the youngest fighter Islam's fought since their last fight, since their first fight. The fact that Islam has looked human and struggled with a full camp Volkanovski, and Dustin Poirier with no hips was able to get the fight back on the feet and out-scramble Islam in certain positions. Again, I understand in the 5th round, Dustin got submitted. That doesn't I don't believe that happens to Arman Sarukian. Arman was savvy enough to understand the position in the 3rd round with Charles where he got put in that darce to just lay flat so he doesn't go out. So he's very aware of his position in these certain situations. I genuinely think Arman it can pull off an upset here. I'm picking Arman Sarukian to win. I wouldn't be surprised if Islam wins, but I'm picking Arman off of these factors because I think he could do it, man. I think not. He might have a chip on the shoulder, but he seems like he's very dedicated to his craft and dedicated to his career. And I got to respect that. And not saying that Makhachev isn't dedicated to his career or craft as well, but you're hearing a bunch of stuff from Islam saying he doesn't want to give to Poirier another shot because he's a quote-unquote another short guy. Brother, Volkanovski on a full camp made you look human. So what are you talking about being afraid or being not interested in giving another quote-unquote short guy a chance? Seems like he's kind of being afraid of getting exposed again by another featherweight, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm picking Arman Sarukian to defeat Islam Makhachev at UFC 310 in LA in front of a pro-Armenian, pro-Arman Sarukian crowd. I don't know if it will be by decision. I can see it. I can see Arman winning by knockout. I know that sounds crazy, but you gotta understand that when you're confident in your scramble abilities and you're confident in your ability to defend or just be aware of whatever happens in terms of the grappling, you're gonna feel more confident throwing something up the middle, throwing a knee up the middle, or throwing a 1-2 down the middle, or an overhand right. He might just fake a takedown and just land that shit clean. We've seen Makhachev get knocked out. And I truly believe Islam Makhachev does not have a good chin. I think in the Dustin Poirier fight, he already said after the fight that he was injured with his leg. So with that will compromise his power. So that one time he was able to land a flush shot on Makhachev, not only did Islam roll with it, but you kind of could see that Dustin didn't really generate as much power as he could have potentially, I don't see that happening with Arman. I think Arman's going to be able to stay in there. It's going to be a very grind heavy fight. And yeah, I'm picking Arman Sarukian for the upset. I've been saying this for a while now that Islam Makhachev, he looks beatable. He looks very beatable. All respect to him because he's made it to where he's at by working hard. But when push comes to shove and you're fighting these elite level fighters, you look human, bro. I don't care what anyone says. I understand he won the first Volk fight. I understand he knocked out Volk when Volk came in on a week notice. I understand he submitted DP, but he didn't submit him until the 5th round. And he was having some moment, and Dustin was having moments against Islam. So, give me Arman to win this fight. Shout out to Armenia. Hopefully they get their first world champion. That would be a beautiful moment. I'm just gonna end the video like this, and this is kind of how I try to break down most of these title fights, especially with like champions that have had multiple defenses. And this is kind of like the thought process I had going into the Kamaru Usman Leon Edwards rematch, the one where Leon head kicked him. I picked Leon going into that fight mainly because one, yes, Leon did improve since the first fight, and Kamaru has looked good, but he also looked like he was sort of declining, especially after the rematch with Colby Covington. So my thought process was ultimately this, that at the end of the day, every single current champion that we have right now, or every current UFC champion that was a champion in the past, at one moment or another, the title reign has to end and another person has to pick up the mantle. That's just how it is. There's no person that's been able to go undefeated and never lose a title fight. It hasn't been done except for John fucking Jones. Whatever. He's the exception. But I picked Leon because of that. I was like, well, Kamaru was on the verge of beating Anderson Silva's record, but realistically, if you look at all the other contenders, because at the time JDM, Shavkat, all these guys were still kind of considered prospects, they weren't contenders, and Leon was a legit contender. I was like, I could see Leon being the one to pull the upset and end his title reign. And it wouldn't look bad if Kamaru Usman was that close to beating Anderson Silva's record, and he didn't, but he still put in the mix as one of the greatest champions of all time, because he is. And I'm not here to discredit Usman either. What he did at welterweight was impressive, and he will forever be known in the history books as one of the greatest champions in the UFC history. But at the end of the day, every champion has to relinquish their belt, unless you're John Jones. But every champion, and Islam Makhachev is no exception to that. Khabib retired early, but who's to say that Khabib would have lost to the next guy or whoever? Again, Khabib, and also the biggest difference between Khabib and Islam Makhachev is I never felt like Khabib was in trouble in any moment in any of his fights, even in his championship defenses. Islam's looked human against Volkanovski and against Dustin Poirier. Khabib got rocked or got clipped one time, but even then he managed to win that entire round and have no trouble after that moment. So I think Khabib, in terms of just being more dominant, controlling, and scarier opponent, is a lot worse of a matchup for someone like Arman Sarukian than Islam, because Islam is open to making mistakes in a certain sense, and he's open to keeping it competitive in a certain sense, and that gives his opponent opportunities to make something happen. And I think Arman can make something happen. In the press conference recently, Arman said that he has a secret special move that he's going to do, and that's going to win him a $50K bonus or whatever. I have no idea what the fuck he's going to do. It could be a thunder roll or maybe an axe kick again or some shit. But yeah, I'm picking Arman Sarukian. And new. Shout out to Armenia one more time. If Armenia can win a world title on this stage in LA, that would be honestly a really beautiful moment for the people of Armenia and Armenian people and of all cultures. But I'm just specifically shouting out Armenia because that's where Arman's from. Yeah, no shade of Islam, because I do respect his abilities, but let's be honest, brother, you looked human in 2 out of your 3 title defenses, and I don't really count the rematch with Volk because it was on a 1-week notice. Why didn't Islam fight Gamrot in Abu Dhabi? Gamrot was the fucking backup fighter and he didn't get the title shot. I think that fight would have been more competitive than the rematch with Volk, but whatever. It is what it is. There's no reason to complain about stuff that happened years ago. But my point still stands. I think Arman's gonna beat him. I'm a pick knockout. I don't see Islam getting submitted, truthfully. It could go to decision, but then it just goes factoring who's gotten the more dominant, aesthetically pleasing control time, and who was able to have better moments on the feet, and et cetera, et cetera. I don't think Islam Makhachev is that good of a striker. I think his defenses and the fact that he's an exceptional wrestler and can control you very well are the threats that open up the striking. But again, with someone like Arman Sarukian, I don't see him being afraid to get taken down. And I think he's more willing to stand in the pocket and try to catch Islam. And if you catch him, there's a good chance you can knock him out. So, yeah, give me Arman Sarukian by knockout in LA to make the first ever UFC Armenian champion. That would be, again, a beautiful moment. Shout out to Arman. Shout out to the 818. And, yeah. In terms of the co-main event, I didn't really have time to think about it because I honestly didn't. I honestly thought O'Malley was going to get the rematch against Merab, but whatever. I don't know, man. Merab's motivated, and Umar has never fought anyone on the level of grappling level as Merab. So it could be interesting. Merab gives Umar a lot of trouble that maybe the Dagestanis and the Khabib camp don't want to talk about because they want to keep that invincible, undefeated, cannot be touched, cannot be beaten aura that they have. But let's be honest, these guys can look human if you outwork them. You know, I think that what that fight, this is a random fight I'm bringing up as a reference, but the Saeed Nurmagomedov versus I think it was Jimmy Martinez, when Jimmy Martinez beat Nurmagomedov, that was the first time I saw Nurmagomedov get outworked, and I was like, oh, so you can beat these guys. I was like, oh, so you can beat these guys, because at that point, Saeed Nurmagomedov was undefeated, lost to Jimmy Martinez, etc., etc. But yeah, I remember that fight and thinking, okay, so if you just outwork these guys, there's a good chance you could beat them. So I think Arman can do that. I think Arman can outwork Islam, and Arman's not coming off an injury. Arman's been more active than Islam somewhat. I believe him to be more active than Islam if he becomes champion too. So yeah, like I said, give me Arman Sarukian and New, and we'll see. We'll see what they say. We'll see what happens when UFC 311 comes around. I'll make more. I'll make a full prediction of the fight card closer to the event. We're about a month away. We're still in December, but I just wanted to get this video out there just so I can be able to say, well, I said this a month ago before it happened. You know, all right. That's the video for today, guys. If you can like and subscribe, I'm trying to build this channel up. I'm going to try to put out more content. I also want to apologize for my voice. I'm a little sick if you couldn't notice. So, yeah. Thanks for watching, supporting, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.